Okay, so introducing Welfare Rights Centre. Welfare Rights Centre is a community legal centre specialising in social security and family assistance law. We provide information, referrals and legal representation to thousands of New South Wales residents each year who have problems with Centrelink. Our peak organisations are Community Legal Centres New South Wales and Community Legal Centres Australia and Economic Justice Australia, sorry. We worked directly with Economic Justice Australia to advocate for law reform by sharing our frontline casework experience with the national network of social security advocates in order to improve the social security system. And now just a final disclaimer. Today's presentation is general information only. It's not legal advice. We can't answer any questions about your specific circumstances, so please keep your questions broad. I'll now hand over to Natalie.
Thanks, Thea, and hello, everybody. Today we're talking about carer payment in particular, and payments for carers in particular, but on this slide you can see how many Australians are receiving help from Centrelink. You can see the biggest group are age pensioners, followed by people receiving family tax benefit. People receiving carer payment and carer allowance together do make up quite a big cohort of people. So you'll see there's about 325,000 people getting carer payment, and there's 678,000 getting carer allowance. There's crossover between those two. You can't add them up because a lot of the carer payment people will also be getting the carer allowance. Because it's such a huge system with so many millions of people getting payments, and it's a massive bureaucracy, mistakes do get made. They happen regularly, and even if it's a systemic issue dealing with a large bureaucracy, it still feels very personal to the people who are having problems with Centrelink. We're just starting with a poll to see what kind of issues and difficulties people are encountering when they're trying to get payments as a carer. So Thea's just launched that poll, and you can tick any of those common issues that you might be seeing for the next minute or so.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. You can see a good 2/3 of you have participated. And I'm going to share the results. And so obviously the biggest difficulty is just understanding how the system works. And it is huge and it is hard and complex. The second most largest issue was knowing what kind of care fits the eligibility criteria. And so we will be talking about that today. And then understanding the rules for each payment. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that now, and Natalie will take over again.
All right, thanks, Thea. And yes, we will be going into a fair bit of detail today about the eligibility criteria for carer payment and carer allowance, and also talking about what kind of care needs to be provided to be eligible for these payments. All right, so let's get started. We're going to start first with a bit of context. So, although as Thea said, there are about 3 million people providing care in Australia, it's only a tiny proportion of these who get Centrelink support for the care that they do. And you can see the figures there. So there's all kinds of caring being done, and we're going to be talking about the particular kind of care that means you can be eligible for some Centrelink payments. So we also want to note that although today we'll be talking about carer payment, many carers can be receiving other kinds of Centrelink payments. Could be parenting payment, could be disability support pension, age pension, job seeker payment. So we certainly don't want to imply that only people getting carer payment are providing care. People on all kinds of payments are providing care. And of course, we know there are people who may not even know they can get a Centrelink payment to support them in their caring work. You won't be surprised at some of these stats about the people getting carer payment. It's a payment people get for a long time for their caring roles. You can see there half of the people getting carer payment have been getting it for 10 years or more. Carers, most are older, 70% over 45. And again, you won't be surprised to know that the majority, 70%, are women. In terms of people getting carer payment, people of all age groups get carer payment. But particularly it's working age people you'll see are the highest cohorts, that 45 to 64-year-old age group. But there are people in all age groups caring. And for people being cared for, you see that predominantly it's older people in that 65 plus age group. And then the next group are children under 16. All right. That's a very early questions. I assume we don't have any questions yet, Thea, but I'll check in.
You're absolutely right. We have not got a question yet.
Very early for that
But the
slide.
slides are in the chat for anyone who needs them.
Oh, great. That's good to hear. All right. So we're going to start just by talking about very briefly some of the general issues for all kinds of Centrelink payments, because this can be a stumbling point, particularly for people who have been migrants to Australia or have lived away for Australia and come back. So you need to be a permanent resident of Australia or a citizen to get almost all Centrelink payments. There are a few exceptions for special benefit, but that is going to be your starting point for carer payment and carer allowance, to be a permanent resident or an Australian citizen. You also have to be in Australia when you lodge an application for those payments. And Australia has to be your permanent home or long-term home. You have to be intending at the time that you're going to keep living in Australia. For some people, whether you're a resident of Australia and it is your home, can be difficult for Centrelink to make a decision about. If people frequently move back and forth between Australia and another country, in that case, Centrelink are going to be looking at what connections you have to Australia compared to that other country or other countries where you spend time. They'll look about whether you have a lease or you own a property here, whether you have family here, whether you have a job here or business here, whether you own assets in Australia. So it's very much looking at what are the signs that show Australia is your home and not somewhere else. The other thing that needs to be covered for all Centrelink payments is you need to provide information about your income and your assets. And if you have a partner, you need to provide information about their income and their assets. And for all payments, you also need to provide proof of identity. So we'll start now by looking at carer payment. And we're just going to have a bit of a video case study to start with.
Hi, Luke. I can see that you've applied for carer payment, but Centrelink rejected your claim. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, the school counsellor at my school said I should be able to get carer payment because my mum's really unwell and I have to help her a lot. So he put in a form, but Centrelink knocked it back.
All right. How old are you, Luke?
I'm 15 in year 10.
Okay. And can you tell me a bit about looking after your mum?
Well, she needs a lot of help because she can't get herself around that much. She can walk a bit sometimes, but usually she needs a wheelchair. So She can't really get herself around the house easily.
Is she able to do any of the cooking?
No, I do that. Basically, I do all the shopping, all the cooking. She might tell me to put some things on a shopping list and I go do all that.
And what about washing clothes?
No, she definitely can't do that. It's too heavy, especially lifting the washing or hanging it out. I mean, most mornings I have to help her get her clothes and things and take them to the bathroom before she has a shower. Sometimes when she's not good, I'll help put her into a chair we have in the shower, and she wears a singlet and pants, especially if she has to wash her hair, but sometimes even that's too much for her.
It sounds like she needs a lot of help. Can she get to the toilet by herself okay?
Sometimes, but sometimes she's so weak, I have to help get her off the toilet. It's not good.
It sounds like she's going through a lot, Luke. Is there anyone else able to help you?
Not really. I mean, we get two cleaners who come in 2 hours a week. They come through an agency for free, but they don't do that much, mainly just vacuuming and dusting. But it does help.
How does your mum manage when you're at school?
Well, the school know her. They know all about it. Sometimes they let me come home at lunch and I can give her lunch and maybe help her go to the toilet. I just tell my mates I'm going home for a cooked lunch. Oh, and sometimes if something happens and she needs help, she'll send me a text and I'll run over at recess because we live just across the road from the school.
It sounds like she needs quite a lot of help to get around. What happens if she needs to go to an appointment?
Well, usually I help her get ready, then I'll help her into a taxi and they'll help her at the other end.
All right. I think the best way to approach this will be...
Okay, so we've just met Luke, who's a young carer who does a lot for his mother, both personal care and helping with tasks around the house and with shopping and so on. And Luke's application for carer payment has been rejected. So we're going to go through the eligibility criteria for carer payment, and then we'll come back and look at Luke's case study and see why he may have been rejected. So the eligibility for carer payment, as we've seen with Luke, there's no particular age limit for someone to apply for carer payment. The key eligibility criteria is that the person applying for carer payment is providing constant care, either to a frail aged person or a child or an adult with a disability or a medical condition. The other criteria are that the care is provided in the home of the person being cared for, that the care is needed long-term, and it's a minimum of 6 months unless it's a terminal illness with a shorter diagnosis of when the person might be expected to die. The caregiver, that is the person applying for carer payment, and the person they're caring for have to both be Australian residents and in Australia. So that means have a permanent resident visa or be an Australian citizen. The person being cared for has to have significant care needs. And later in the presentation, we'll have a look at how those care needs are assessed as to whether they're high enough to get carer payment. And the income and assets of the carer and the person receiving care have to be underneath the limits to get carer payment. So there's a lot there. In terms of what is care, this is an important point. So care is defined in the Social Security Act as including attention and supervision. And it's interpreted to mean personal care, not just things like housework and gardening. So there have been decisions by the Administrative Review Tribunal and its predecessor, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, that have found that doing household or domestic tasks alone is not the kind of care for which you can get carer payment. So if we think back to Luke in the case study, he mentioned doing a whole range of things for his mum. And some of that included cooking and shopping and washing. And if he hadn't been doing the other things, like helping his mum on and off the toilet and helping her with showering, he's not going to be eligible for carer payment because it's not enough for those household kind of tasks. It has to be what's called personal care. So that really does involve helping people feed themselves, helping people wash themselves, helping people move, bed to chair, chair to bed, helping people on and off the toilet, or helping them if they're incontinent, with incontinence products, all that kind of thing. So it's very much personal care. And I suppose the distinction that's been made in some tribunal decisions is that some of those household tasks, whether you vacuum today or tomorrow, whether you hang out the washing today or tomorrow, it's not kind of critical, but things like getting someone to eat their meal, go to the toilet, get washed, they have to be done regularly, and they have to be done. They can't be put off indefinitely like some household tasks can be. So that's some of the ways the tribunal has distinguished between household tasks and personal care. So for carer payment, we're looking at personal care, but we're also looking at supervision. So for some people with cognitive disabilities, the key part of the care might be just monitoring that they don't harm themselves or harm anyone else. And that is also in that category of personal care. Now, what the requirement for carer payment is that the carer is providing constant care. Now, there's a document called the Social Security Guide, which helps Centrelink officers interpret the Social Security law. And in that guide, it says that constant care is care on a daily basis for a significant period each day. And it's described as being at least the equivalent of a normal working day in that personal care work. Because the idea is if you're getting carer payment, it's because your caring responsibilities stop you from being able to work a full-time job. So you're not expected to care for 24 hours a day, but in terms of care, we're really looking at a normal working day, which should be looking at 7 to 8 hours of care work each day. Now, a question that does come up for us here with our clients is it possible to get carer payment and also work or also study? And the answer is yes, but it depends on how many hours a week you might be working or studying. So you'll see here that I've got an extract from a case that was before the tribunal in 2018, where it said pretty clearly, generally, if a person is working 25 hours plus a week, that person is unlikely to be able to be providing constant care. The Social Security Guide used to say that someone who's getting carer payment won't be eligible, will stop being eligible for carer payment if they start working 25 hours or more a week. The guide's been recently changed to make that a bit more flexible. So instead of 25 hours a week, it says 100 hours every 4-week period. So basically, you can stay eligible for carer payment while working up to 100 hours over a 4-week period. And the guide also notes that if you work more than 100 hours in a 4-week period, you can use some of your respite days to mean you maintain your eligibility for carer payment. And a bit further on in the presentation, we'll talk about respite days for carer payment. So, as well as providing constant care, not working or studying more than 100 hours every 4 weeks, a part of the process is also to assess whether the person's care needs are severe enough or significant enough to make the person eligible for carer payment. And this assessment is done using 2 tools, one for adults and one for children. And for each of these tools, there's a series of questions to be answered by the carer and another series of answers to be for a health professional to fill out. The process is different. If a person has a terminal illness with less than 3-month life expectancy, carer payment can just be granted if there's medical evidence of that. But otherwise, the person being cared for needs to go through this process of getting the tool applied to their situation. So the tools are looking at how much of that personal care a person requires. So if it's an adult with things like eating, bathing, behavior management. And what we've done is shown you here in the slides an extract from the Adult Disability Assessment tool. And you'll see that there are kind of multiple response answers to each questions, which address different things. So these first questions are about mobility, whether the person can move around without any help or needing some degree of help, whether they experience falls, whether they can move from bed to chair, and whether they need aids to do that or not. They look at the person's hearing, person's eyesight, whether they need help during the night, whether they're continent or not, whether they need continence equipment or aids, whether they can use the toilet independently, whether they wander off or run away, whether they have behaviors that might be disturbing to people, such as shouting, screaming, and threatening, whether they are violent towards other people and might hurt other people. So the carers are asked to answer all those questions. And then the next section is a health professional questionnaire. And this is the introductory information that's given to the health professional. And you'll see there in the second paragraph that the health professional is meant to comment on what the person actually does, as opposed to what they could do. And they ask the health professional to think about the previous few days. But sometimes they might have to give an opinion for what the person's situation is for a longer period than that. So for the health professional report, you'll see here, it addresses continence, grooming, toilet use, feeding, moving from bed to chair to standing, mobility, dressing, using stairs, bathing, cognitive function and behavior. So if you want to look at the complete versions of the assessment tools for adults and for children, we've put the links here, which will take you to the complete versions of both of those. Now, once the carer and the health professional fill out those questionnaires, then scores are calculated, and the scores, it's not a single score that's relevant, because carer payment may be paid for caring for one adult or one child with a disability, in which case the care needs for that single adult or single child has to be relatively higher than if the person is caring for more than one person with a disability, or if they're caring for a child as well as an adult with a disability. And there are also scores for people who might need more than one person providing constant care because their disability is so severe. So here are just a few scoring examples. So if there's a single adult with a disability, they need a score of 25 with a health professional score of at least 10. But if for a person to have more than one person get carer payment to care for them, it's a much higher score. So you're looking at a score of 80 with a health professional score of 32. So you can get carer payment in a whole range of situations. So as we said, caring for a single adult with a high score, or an adult with a lower score, but you're also caring for a dependent child or children, or a single child with a severe disability or medical condition, or 2 or more children with a less severe disability or medical condition, or 1 or more children with a disability and a lower score adult. So all kinds of scenarios are covered with carer payment. In terms of who can fill out the treating health professional questionnaire, it's quite a broad range of people who can do that. It's most commonly a doctor, but it could also be a registered nurse, an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, a member of an aged care assessment team, and in some circumstances, an Aboriginal health worker. And that's for people in remote communities who have very limited access to health professionals. But in that case, the disability there at least has to have been a diagnosis by a doctor. For the income and assets information, it's the pension income and assets tests that apply to the person applying for carer payment. So that's similar to the age pension, the disability pension. There are special income and assets tests for the care receiver. And in particular, that's where the care receiver has a lower score, or if the care receiver is not getting a Centrelink payment or a veterans payment, which implies they've got some assets or some way of supporting themselves. All right, we've reached questions again there, so maybe there's some by now.
There are.
Okay.
Okay. One question Louise has asked was, how often is the eligibility criteria reviewed?
Okay. So I suppose the eligibility criteria are applied when the person applies for carer payment. After that, there is no set timetable for reviews. So Centrelink do certainly have some kind of a process where they review a random sample of people getting payments to check that they're eligible. So it's always possible you get a letter saying, we're conducting a review of your eligibility. Can you please provide us with the following documents and so on? Other than that, it may be if there's some particular event, which means the carer is in contact with Centrelink, that may raise questions about ongoing eligibility. that could happen. Or there may never be a review of eligibility. That's also possible. But the person has an obligation, the person getting carer payment, once they're getting it, they've got an obligation to inform Centrelink about any change of circumstance that would affect their eligibility, whether that's income and assets, whether that's a change in the situation of the person they're caring for, some miraculous improvement, or they stop caring for that person. So you always have to remember that it's your obligation as a person getting a payment to tell Centrelink about changes.
Okay, thanks. We also have a question about the time of caring. Does the 100 hours of work per month include travel times to and from the workplace?
Oh,
I think not. Just to step in there.
yes, that's something I might double check in the break, because I feel like there was a change in
Yeah,
policy,
I
but
think
I could be, there was a change, and I need to double check in which direction the change went.
all right, we'll check that for you.
Yeah.
All right, and then another question was, does the assessment have to be on the prescribed medical report that from Centrelink? So those using those forms.
Yes. So you have to use those one of the relevant tools, the one for the adult or the one for the child. I don't think there's any way of avoiding that, except in the situation where it's a terminal illness with less than 3 months life expectancy. I think that's the only situation where you don't have to use the assessment tools.
Okay. The other one was, can social workers fill out one of those health professional forms?
No, social workers are not on the list of people, and I suppose they're not considered health professionals.
And Jerry's asked, does the carer need to live under the same house with the care person?
No, but the care has to be provided in the home of the person being cared for. There's not a requirement that the carer has to live there.
Okay. And there's just two other shorter ones. How long do you need to be engaged in caring before applying for the carer payment?
You can apply straight away from the beginning.
Okay. And then can psychologists complete the forms?
They don't seem to be on my list, but I can double check that.
All right. We are getting a few more questions, but I think we'll move
That's
on
okay.
and add a
Oh,
time.
no, we've got time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the income limit for a child, the care receiver who is aged between 16 and 18? I think that might be a bit specific. You might have to check the forms.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Sorry, what is the income limit for a child, the care receiver, who is aged between 16 and 18?
Okay. That it depends. If the income test applies to them at all, it would only be if they weren't getting a Centrelink payment themselves and were what they call a lower score adult. And I don't have the actual figure in my head. I'd have to check that if, yeah, they weren't getting their own payment.
Okay. And Leanne has asked, how long does it take to process an application?
Oh, I think processing times do vary quite a lot. And if you ask Centrelink, they'll say it's because, you know, they realize they need more documents, and then they ask you to provide more documents, and then you provide them, and then they realize they need even more documents, and so on. But certainly for some of these payments, it can take a few months and maybe longer sometimes. But you
Okay.
should get back pay back to the date you lodged your claim if it's ultimately successful.
Thanks. And we've had confirmation from Emma from LCCL, and it is that the 100 hours doesn't include the following activities, and you don't need to report them: travel time to and from your paid work or self-employment.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Emma.
I can cross that off my checking list.
All right. I think we can move on.
All right. We've moved pretty quickly. So the next slide was a break, but I think we'll, unless there are more questions, we'll insert the break a bit later.
I do have a question. All
Okay.
right, I do have one more.
Mhm.
And that is, what happens when on paper a person is the carer of someone, but in reality, the carer is actually someone else? The someone else would be able to claim payments. I'm not completely clear on this question.
Well, it's like someone applies to carer payment, but they're not really doing the caring. Someone else is. That's how I interpret the question.
Yes.
I suppose that's fraud. And if Centrelink finds out, the person could be investigated for prosecution and they would be asked to pay back all the payments, carer payments they've been paid while not actually caring for someone. And I suppose if the other person who is actually caring applies for a carer payment, that would alert Centrelink to the fact that the person currently getting carer payment may not be caring and trigger an investigation into them.
Great. So I think there's a question too about whether or not if a carer studies 2 days a week, will they still receive the payment? And
well, I suppose if it's less than 25 hours a week and they can show that they're providing constant care around their study times, potentially yes.
right. We're getting quite a few more questions. So
Okay.
for clients who are waiting for their age pension until they're 67 years old and require an RACF admission in 65 aged care home. Sorry, this is very specific. What payment would be helpful to assist their transition and daily care fee in aged home?
Oh, this is a bit off topic because
Yeah,
this
yeah.
sounds like someone needing care, not a person who's a carer. But I suppose the quick answer is maybe, yeah, it would depend. Maybe job seeker payment, maybe special benefit. But it's a very specific question. So, and it's not about caring. So I think we'll pass over that one.
Thank you. If the person being cared for has passed or died, will the carer still get back pay for the period? So I suppose they made a claim and then they cared and then the person died and then.
Oh, okay. Before the claim was granted,
Yes.
the person they're caring for has died. Yes, they should still get back pay for the period of time they were caring. And in some situations, carer payment continues for a period after the person you're caring for has died, what people sometimes call a bereavement payment.
Okay. For clients who are, oh no, I've done that one. Sorry. When carers are admitted to hospital for their own health issues, do they still receive a carer payment or can Centrelink replace with other relevant payments?
We're getting onto that. So yes, that will be covered later.
I think we'll use that as our segue.
Okay, fair enough. All right. As I say, we did have a break slide in here, but I think we'll go a bit further before having a break. So we're going to move on now to talk about carer allowance. I know what I should have done and didn't. Let's go back to visit Luke. So if we think back to our carer payment case study about Luke, Luke was definitely providing personal care to his mother as well as helping with those household tasks. The reason Luke's claim was rejected was that it was decided he wasn't providing constant care because he was at school 5 days a week, 9 till 3. That didn't come within the 25 hours a week, or it wasn't much over, but it was considered to be over, and that he wasn't providing constant care and therefore was not eligible for the carer payment. Although interestingly now that it's 100 hours every 4 weeks, not 25 hours a week is the limit. If I don't know, school holidays and how that would work out, probably would still be a problem. So yes, so for Luke, his age wasn't a problem. He was providing the right type of care. He was providing it in the home of the person he was caring for. He's an Australian resident. His mother's an Australian resident. They're in Australia, ticked all those boxes, but couldn't tick the constant care box because of the number of hours each week he was away from the home and at school. So that was Luke's problem with carer payment. So now we'll move on to talk about carer allowance. And again, we're going to start with a bit of a video case study.
Hi, George. My name's Daniel from the Welfare Rights Centre. How are you going today?
Not too bad, Daniel.
That's good.
Getting on.
Okay, so I understand you're wanting to claim carer allowance because you're caring for your wife. Is that right?
Yes, Carer New South Wales suggested I ring Welfare Rights and see where I stand in this situation with my wife.
All right. So can you just tell me a little bit about your wife and any conditions she's experiencing at the moment?
Yes, Tina, about 2 years ago, started to get a bit of dementia. Now it's got worse, and I'm finding now I've got to do everything for her, including the cooking, washing, everything. Where she used to pay the bills before, I've even got to take over the bill payment because I just realised a few weeks ago that there's a few bills that haven't been paid that are outstanding, especially the house insurance. A little bit worried, so I've taken over everything now.
Got you. Okay, so it sounds like her conditions deteriorated. Could you just describe to me what a day in the life of you caring for your partner at the moment?
Well, getting out of bed in the morning, making sure she's okay, now helping her to get dressed and prepare herself for the day. I find, it's a bit worrying, the work I've got to do. I've virtually don't stop from start to finish. She relies on me to do everything now. And if I'm not in the house and I've had to go outside and hang the washing out, she worries. No one's there.
Yeah.
Next week, I've got a dentist's appointment, which I'm worried about because I'll have to find someone to come in and take my place while I'm at the dentist. I can't even go out and get a haircut.
Okay, that sounds very difficult.
Yeah.
You've got a lot on your plate at the moment. All right, we'll go through some very specific questions about her care needs in a moment. I just wanted to quickly cover off on your asset situation. Like, are you living, do you own your own home and living together with your wife?
Living together, we're on the pension. Both of us are on the pension. We're living in a unit which we've owned for a few years. A few years back, we decided to buy a unit in the same block that we're in. The rent is paying for the mortgage there, so that's okay. And we own of course, we own our own unit.
Okay, got you. All right. So we'll just go to some of those specific questions about her care needs now.
Okay, so we've just met George and hearing about his wife Tina and her experience of having dementia. So they're both age pensioners. They're likely to be part pensioners because of they've got their investment property and some rental income coming in. And George is wondering if there's anything he can get from Centrelink to support him in caring for Tina. So carer allowance, it's not an income support payment like carer payment. So income support payments are meant to be in money you can live on for people who aren't able to work. So carer allowance is not that. It's what we think of as a supplementary payment or an extra payment to help people in particular situations. So George's income support payment is his age pension. But the question becomes, is he eligible to get carer allowance on top of his age pension because he now has this role of caring for his wife? So we're going to go through the eligibility criteria for carer allowance. And I think I mentioned previously, it's very common for people who get carer payment to also get carer allowance. But people on other Centrelink payments like age pension also get the carer allowance. So my mother has dementia, and before she went into aged care, my father, who was an age pensioner, was getting carer allowance when he was caring for her at home. So a bit like George. All right. So our eligibility criteria for carer allowance is that the carer is providing care and attention on a daily basis. So this is an easier test to meet than the constant care requirement for carer payment. And if you think back to the table we showed you at the beginning, there are many more people, twice as many people getting carer allowance compared to carer payment. And that's because the threshold is lower. It's easier to get on carer allowance compared to carer payment. It's also a bit more flexibility in where the care is provided. So the care has to be provided in the private home of either the person giving the care or the person receiving the care. The care needs to be needed permanently or for a minimum of 12 months. Once again, the caregiver and care receiver have to be Australian permanent residents or citizens and living in Australia as their home. The person who provides the care is narrower for carer allowance compared to carer payment. So the care has to be provided by the parent or guardian of a child or the family member of an adult. And if it's not a family member, the person has to be kind of approved by Centrelink to be providing the care to get carer allowance. The same tools are used to assess whether the care needs are severe enough or significant enough to get carer allowance. So the adult tool and the child assessment tool. The income and assets tests are different for carer allowance, which can be another reason why there are many more people getting carer allowance compared to carer payment. So significantly, there's no asset test for carer allowance, and the income test is very generous. So the income of the carer and their partner, if they have one, needs to be less than $250,000 a year. So if we think back to George in our case study, he does have that investment property, but there's no asset test. So the value of that unit's not a problem. and he is getting some rental income for that property, but I'm expecting it would be way less than 250,000 a year. So the income and assets tests are not going to be a problem for George. So looking at whether George is providing care and attention, what the Social Security Guide says about care and attention is that the carer provides some additional care and attention on a daily basis to a person because of their disability or medical condition that would not be required if they did not have that disability. So again, it's a bit of an easier test to meet than for carer payment. In a situation where the carer and the care receiver aren't living in the same property, the care and attention must be provided for at least 20 hours a week, so a few hours a day over the course of a week. So it is an easier test to meet. In terms of assessing care needs, using those same assessment tools, you'll see there are a range of different scores. You'll see there in the second dot point that if a person is assessed as being eligible for carer payment and receiving carer payment for a child, they'll automatically get carer allowance for caring for that child as well. And you'll see again, there are different scores depending on how many people you're caring for and the severity of their care needs. There's a bit of a table here just showing some of the differences between the criteria for carer payment and carer allowance. So as I mentioned, carer payment's an income support payment, whereas carer allowance is not. It's a supplementary payment. The test about care is different. So we've got that constant care for carer payment, daily care and attention for carer allowance. For carer payment, the care has to be in the care receiver's home. Different for carer allowance, which can be in the caregiver's or the care receiver's home. The income and assets tests are different and more generous for carer allowance. Carer payment can be paid to more than one carer for the same person. Carer allowance is paid per person you're being cared for, but there are those limitations on who can provide the care in carer allowance. One difference with carer allowance is that it can be shared between two people, like separated parents, if they each spend some time caring for their child with a disability or a medical condition. So for George, he is providing daily care and attention. He's doing a lot of housework, and like with carer payment, housework alone is not enough. He has to be doing some either personal care needs or supervision. And it sounds like because Tina has dementia, George is supervising her to make sure she gets dressed appropriately, make sure she gets her meals, making sure she gets to where she needs to get to and gets appropriate healthcare, all that kind of thing. So in George's case, he is providing that daily care and attention. And a lot of it is what we'd call supervisory care. It's in their own home. He's a family member. Seems like he's within the income and assets tests. So I think George should be able to get the carer allowance in addition to his what's likely to be a part age pension for the work he does caring for Tina. All right, are there any questions there about carer allowance?
Yes, and we have a few others as well.
Okay.
Okay, so around carer allowance, are neighbours or and friends excluded from receiving a carer allowance? I think
They're not excluded, but they're not automatically in either. So they need to be approved
Okay.
by Centrelink.
For carer's allowance, can a foster parent and or a carer can a foster parent or a carer and who is both or a carer able to claim? So I think it's about the two people claiming here. Can a foster parent and or a carer claim the allowance?
I think if it's a foster care arrangement, that's likely to come within the parent guardian role. So I can't, I'd have to check the guide, but I suspect a foster carer would be able to get carer allowance if the child that they're fostering has a disability or a medical condition. That means they need additional care and they meet the criteria in the assessment tool. In terms of whether anyone else can, who's not a parent or a guardian or someone analogous like a foster carer, again, it would depend if Centrelink approved them as appropriate to get carer allowance.
Okay. For the allowance, is there a restriction on other payments received, like guardian payment?
I'm afraid I don't know what a guardian payment is. It's not a social security payment. Yes, I just don't know what that payment means. But no, there's not a restriction on what other Centrelink payment you get, or you might not be getting another Centrelink payment. You might have other sources of income and still be able to get carer allowance as long as you're under the income test and asset test. There's no asset test, so as long as you're under the 250,000 a year household income.
Yeah, so
which
that's
would be
quite
many
a
of
generous.
us.
Yes. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. There was a qualifier on the guardian payment. The
Okay.
definition of guardian relates to my question. So I think it was whatever payment the possible guardian or sort of parent-like or carer role might have
Right.
been receiving. But I think you answered it anyway, because it's about whatever payment they're receiving.
It's not really, it doesn't really matter. Yep.
Yep. Okay. Now, if a child had severe or profound disability and required support one-on-one 24/7 by parents and second support person anywhere from 6 or more hours, in a 2-to-1 capacity, the second person is funded by NDIS. What would the parent be eligible for with regards to carer supports? What would the
Oh, I think I need.
it's
hard to keep all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, generally with these kinds of questions, we say apply and see if you're successful. Like, never hesitate to actually apply for a payment.
Yep, that's good
Because
advice.
that's the quickest and easiest way of finding out if you might be eligible.
All right.
Apply.
So we've had a few questions about both of the case studies.
Mhm.
And one of we kind of I'll stick with kind of the carer allowance and carer payment around George. So sorry, just double checking. Is George not eligible for carer payment due to his income and assets test?
George is getting the age pension, so he doesn't need carer payment because he already has an income support payment. And because of the description around his income and assets, I suspect he's not getting a full age pension. He'd be getting a part age pension. So he doesn't need carer payment because his age pension does the job the carer payment does if you don't have an age pension.
All right. And what is the carer allowance meant to pay for in terms of services, etc.?
There's no restriction on how you spend it. It's just meant to be a recognition that there can be extra costs involved when you're caring for someone, I think. So, I mean, when my father was getting care allowance. I think a lot of it was spent on, he probably got taxis more often because it was hard for my mum to use public transport as her dementia advanced and her behaviour became a little tricky. And, you know, so but there's no requirement to spend it in a particular way.
Okay. And so there's just someone is just double checking. So a 75-year of age woman caring for a partner experiencing early onset dementia could access the carer allowance in addition to the pension.
Yes, as long as the care needs of the partner got a high enough score on the assessment tool. So it just depends on how much care and supervision that person needed. But if they got the high enough score on the assessment tool, yes.
Okay. And then back to the Luke case study, which I'm not sure that you can actually answer at the moment, and we might have to follow up. But it was, there were two things. One was, what happens if Luke was kind of homeschooled or studied online so he could care for his mother? Because there was I think the assumption that Luke couldn't get a carer payment because he was attending school. But we also have this the new laws, which kind of confuse things, but because it says the 100 hours doesn't include the following activities and you don't need to report them: travel time to and from your paid work or self-employment, study. So that we were wondering then if that might have changed in terms of that case study.
Yeah, maybe it has. Yeah, I have to check that.
All right. So we'll follow up with you.
Whether that means personal study, but I think when it's away from the property where the person being cared for lives might be the issue. But yeah, I can double check that.
Yeah, I think we need we need the guide.
Yeah. The trouble is on my computer, I can't have that open and look at the presentation. That's why
Understood.
it's confusing that I can't do that, but I haven't worked out a way to do that.
Well, maybe this is the time. We like to give everyone a moment so they can get up, maybe grab a cup of tea, use the bathroom, just have a few minutes. So
yes,
this seems like a good time. We've been at it over an hour.
Yeah, we'll come back at 3:10.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. I've had time to cover a couple of those outstanding questions in the break, but not all. So the answer is yes, psychologists are able to complete the medical professional form. And the other question was about the income test for the care receiver. So the assets of the care receiver and partner, if they have one, must not exceed $868,500. Very generous. And the annual income of the care receiver and partner, if they have one, must not exceed $140,795. So quite generous income test for care receiver. I didn't get onto the study in 100 hours issue, I'm afraid.
We'll get there.
Okay. So now, having gone through the eligibility criteria for carer payment and carer allowance, we're going to look at some of the issues that frequently come up for people getting these payments. And it's one of the questions flagged about respite and days when you're not able to care. We'll touch on some of those. All right. So the first thing we'll look at is something that's described in the guide as temporary cessation of care. So it's not that your care relationship is ended, it's that for some temporary period, you can't provide care or are not providing care. So how this works is that for both carer payment and carer allowance, people can have breaks from caring and maintain eligibility for those payments. So it's recognised that people in caring roles do need some respite. So the amount of respite offered is up to 63 days in any calendar year. But you do need to tell Centrelink if you're taking a break from caring. So these respite days can be used for anything, including having a holiday or just having a break. Sometimes you can get more than 63 days of not caring and still keep your payments, but that's for a special reason in exceptional circumstances. And that would have to be approved by Centrelink. So don't assume you could get that. These, as well as in addition to the respite days where the carer keeps getting paid even though they're not providing care on those days, you can also continue to be paid carer payment and carer allowance for up to 63 days while the person receiving care, who's an adult, is in hospital, as long as the carer is visiting regularly and assisting with the care of that person in hospital. So that's on top of the ordinary respite days. These are days you can continue to be paid while the person you're caring for is in hospital, as long as you have some active involvement in their care during the time they're in hospital. Where it's a child who's receiving care, a person can be paid carer payment and carer allowance for an unlimited number of days while the child's in hospital. Again, providing the carer is still going to the hospital and providing that additional care and attention while the child's in hospital. So I hope that's clear that you've got the hospital 63 days. And in addition to that, the general 63 respite days each calendar year. If the person is not receiving care for more than 63 days, then the carer payment and carer allowance will stop. So if the person's admitted to hospital or is admitted to respite in an aged care facility, once the person is not being cared for the 63 days, and then the payment will stop. If there's a permanent admission to an institution, which is most likely an aged care facility, the carer payment keeps going for 14 weeks after the admission to that facility. And that is really to allow the person getting the carer payment to adjust their circumstances now that they're no longer a carer. So they might need to apply for another Centrelink payment. They might need to look for a job. So it gives them a bit of time, that 3-month period, to get adjusted to the fact that they're no longer a carer. It's so important to tell Centrelink within 14 days if you stop caring for someone, and that particularly at the time someone's moving into an aged care facility, for example, it can be a pretty stressful time, and calling Centrelink may be the last thing on your mind. But if you don't tell Centrelink and you keep getting payments into the future, then there's always the risk of getting a debt. The other thing I wanted to mention was about when people can get the carer payment and carer allowance if they're outside of Australia. So carer payment can still be paid outside Australia in a few different situations for up to 6 weeks. So if the carer and the person they're caring for go overseas together, they get the carer payment and care allowance continue for up to 6 weeks. If the carer is traveling without the person they're caring for, they can be paid while they're overseas for up to 6 weeks, but only if there's enough of their 63 days left in that calendar year, because they're not traveling with the person they're caring for. Therefore, they have to use their respite days. And if they don't have enough respite days left, that will stop. But if they do have enough respite days, you can be paid outside Australia for up to 6 weeks. If it's the person receiving care who goes overseas without their carer, the person back in Australia, who's usually the carer, will need to use their respite days to keep getting paid. But their payments might stop if the respite days run out, when they're still not caring for the person, if the person hasn't returned from their trip. Care allowance can be paid outside of Australia for up to 6 weeks, but you need to be mindful of the rules about payment overseas for whatever other Centrelink payment the person might be getting in addition to the carer allowance. So if they're, for example, if they're getting the age pension, that's quite flexible for being paid overseas, whereas if they're getting the job seeker payment, that's very restricted and you can't get that paid overseas. So for carer allowance, you've always got to be mindful about the rules around the main income support payment. There are a couple of other payments for carers that are called a carer supplement and a child disability assistance payment. But these do not have to be separately applied for. They're paid automatically if you're getting carer payment in the case of the carer supplement or carer allowance, and carer allowance in the case of the child disability assistance payment. So one thing I should mention when we were talking about the respite days for carer payment and carer allowance, while they both have respite days, the 63 days in the calendar year, if you're getting both carer payment and carer allowance, those respite days are concurrent. So it's still a total of 63 if you get both payments. It's not double. You don't get 126. All right, back to questions, Thea.
Yes, we do have a few. Just double checking, if care receiver is with the carer during holidays away from home, but not necessarily overseas, do those same rules apply? Is this counted as a break, or because the care receiver and the carer are together on a holiday, they're still providing the care? And
yeah, they're still providing the care. And that will just go on as normal. I mentioned holidays overseas in particular, because there are limits on how long you can be paid while you're outside of Australia.
right,
which are to do with being outside of Australia, and other payments have limits on how long you can be paid outside Australia, or if you can be paid outside Australia. So that's the added complication of overseas trips.
Okay. And I do have a question here, and I think I know the answer, but I'll ask you, up to what age is considered a child?
Okay, so it's up to 16. Yes, you start being treated as an adult in terms of carer payment when you turn 16. And that's actually something that would be useful to mention, because sometimes the transition from getting carer payment for a child, the transition when that child turns 16 and then it turns into carer payment adult, except it doesn't just happen automatically. So in theory, when a child is still 15, in the few months before they turn 16, the carer should receive a bunch of forms or be told to fill out forms if they want to apply for carer payment adult for after their child turns 16. And the child turning 16 will be assessed under the adult disability assessment tool. And it obviously depends on the outcome and score of that tool, whether the carer will be able to keep getting carer payment for that person after they turn 16. So there are some important things to be aware of. So if a person has been getting carer payment for a child, those payments will stop when that child is 16 years and 3 months old, unless the carer has put in an application for carer payment adult before that child turns 16. So if the carer put in that application for carer payment adult before the child turns 16, they'll keep being paid the carer payment for a child kind of indefinitely until the assessment of the carer payment adult claim is completed. So it is important to get those transition forms in before the child turns 16 to avoid the carer payment stopping when the child, is 3 months after their 16th birthday.
Okay.
So it's still possible to apply, if if the papers aren't put in before the child's 16th birthday, you can still put them in, they'll still be assessed, it could still all work out, but there could end up being a gap between the carer payment child finishing and the carer payment adult starting.
Okay. And then back to holidays with carers and care receivers. If you go overseas for 6 months, do you need to reapply on return?
Yes, because the payment would have been cut off, cancelled, if you're away from Australia that long, and you would have to reapply when you return.
Okay. And there was clarification being sought. So if the person goes into hospital and they have the 63 days of respite, they still have 63 days of respite because hospital is not considered respite.
Yes, assuming you're going to the hospital every day and supporting that person while they're in hospital.
Right. So then if you weren't going and caring,
if you weren't doing that, then you could use your 63 respite days while the person's in hospital if you're not having that caring role while they're in hospital.
All right. And can the parent get paid for both care supplement and child disability supplement as well?
Yes, I think so.
All right. Bring them on, people, if there's any more questions. I think there's just a slightly more extended definition of the child question, the age of a child, when there is the possibility that the person being cared for has a very young mental development, or so
okay, it's it's on chronological age. Yeah, is so whoever they are and whatever the person's cognitive ability, once they turn 16, they're not going to be able to get carer payment child and will be assessed under the adult assessment tool.
Thank you. I think that wraps up our questions for the moment.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to appeals. And this is all about what you can do if Centrelink makes a decision that you're not happy with. So if your carer payment application is rejected or your carer payment is suspended or cancelled, this is the process for what you can do. So most Centrelink decisions can be reviewed, which I suppose is the technical word, and the word used in the legislation, but we commonly call it an appeal. So decisions made around payments, which is a payment is granted. So the rate of payment, if you're not happy with the rate of the payment, you don't think it's correct, that can be reviewed. If it's rejected, that can be reviewed. If it's cancelled, that can be reviewed. If Centrelink raise a debt, that can be reviewed. And it's free. There's no cost involved throughout the appeal process. We do suggest that you stop and get advice before appealing against a debt in particular, because it is possible for debts to increase when you appeal against a debt. So it's important to know about the risk of that happening before you launch into an appeal process relating to a debt. Sometimes going through the appeal process might be the only way you get to the bottom of why Centrelink have made a particular decision. It's often not clear in the letters you get why they've made a particular decision. So sometimes the first stage of the appeal process, which we'll go into, we use it as a kind of a fact-finding mission. So how the appeal process works is that the first stage is an internal review at Centrelink, and a senior person within Centrelink called an authorised review officer will look at the decision. They haven't been involved with it up to that point, and check if it's correct. Now, the time limit for asking for that internal review varies depending on the type of issue that you're appealing against. So if it's about a rejection or a cancellation or the rate of a payment, generally you have to ask for the internal review within 13 weeks of being notified of that decision. It's different for the family tax benefit payments, which we're not talking about today, which is commonly a year, very short for paid parental leave. And for debts in particular, there's no time limit. These time limits are not strict time limits, and you can ask for a review anytime, but they are strict time limits in terms of getting back pay if your appeal is successful. That's why they're so important. If you're not happy with the decision from the authorised review officer in Centrelink, you can choose to appeal further to a tribunal. It's currently called the Administrative Review Tribunal. This tribunal came into existence a year ago and replaced the previous tribunal that was called the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. So we've gone from the AAT to now having the ART. The process at the first review at the Administrative Review Tribunal is quite informal. So it's generally a telephone conversation with the person asking for the review and a member of the tribunal. No one from Centrelink is generally involved. So it's quite, I suppose, achievable for people to do even without legal representation, because the process is so informal and pretty easy to engage with. If you're not happy with the decision made by the tribunal at that first review, you have the option of asking the tribunal for a second review. While this process is free, it is much more formal and more like legal proceedings are generally, where Centrelink is represented by either an in-house lawyer or a law firm, and the process is more like a traditional legal process. But the tribunal is still meant to facilitate unrepresented people to participate fully in that process. So the time limits to apply for a first review are going to be, in the case of carer payment and carer allowance, they're going to be 13 weeks if it's about a rejection or a cancellation or a rate of payment dispute. Again, no time limit for a debt. For a second tribunal review, you've basically got 28 days from when you get your first tribunal decision. And if you're not happy with your second review at the tribunal, you can head off to the federal court. You've got 28 days to do that. Definitely don't do that without getting legal advice, because while it's been free for the first 3 layers, the federal court has filing fees, but more significantly, if you're unsuccessful in your federal court case, you could be ordered to pay Centrelink, the federal government, in effect, many thousands of dollars in legal costs. So please, no one should be going there without detailed advice. All right. Any more questions, Thea? I think we're drawing to the end now.
Yes. Susan has asked, why don't you get detailed information about why a claim has been rejected?
Oh, yes. I think because I gather the letters they send are automated, and they have a bank of reasons that are often just a few words. And yeah, it's just the way their system works. They don't give detailed reasons at that first decision. And it's only if you go to the review process, then you'll get a detailed letter setting out exactly why they've made that decision and what evidence they've based it on.
Right. And Susan did make the point that she thought it would be their legislative responsibility to do so.
Well, they do give you a reason, but it's quite brief.
Okay. And Richard has asked, can you change or withdraw a carer's allowance if it was granted because another carer wished to apply for the carer's allowance for the care receiver?
Yes, at any point you can say to Centrelink, I don't want to receive this payment anymore, or I'm no longer caring for this person anymore, and they'll stop the payment.
Right. But you can't kind of do a transfer swap over.
No, you can't just kind of call them and say, I want to swap my payment to someone else. They have to go through the application process and all those criteria. They have to prove their identity, they have to provide information about their income and assets and their Australian residence and so on. So every person has to be assessed through the full process.
Okay. And there's another question about, is there a time limit for Centrelink to do the reviews?
Their letters say we aim to complete the review within a certain number of days. But in our experience, they often exceed their timeframes, but they're not legislated timeframes. They're what they aim to achieve. And for some disability support, pension and debt reviews, 6 months to a year is not uncommon.
All right. And that's it for the questions. I haven't received any further.
Okay.
All right.
We'll get an early mark. No one will complain about that, I'm sure. So I think it's over to you, Thea, at this point.
Thanks. Okay, so what we've provided here is a little bit more of an outline about what help you can get from Centrelink. So community workers can support clients directly with Centrelink with their client's authorization. Centrelink also offers digital coaching to support customers' online access, and also offers a booking service to make appointments. So some people may not be aware of that at this point. And the next slide, please. Community workers and clients can also access translation services. Oh, I think these are 2 different versions. So that was what the slide before, which was the translation services through Centrelink, and have multicultural and Indigenous service officers who may be able to help. If you have a problem with Centrelink, sorry, the welfare rights slide, with Centrelink in New South Wales, and you wish to speak to someone at the Welfare Rights Centre, Our client intake line is open every Monday and Wednesday from 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 a.m. and that's in Sydney. Or you can contact us online through our website or via our email. If you can just move through to the next.
Thea, we might mention that we do have kind of sister organisations for people in other states and territories, and contact details are on the EJA website if you're not in New South Wales.
This is true. Yes, so there are sister centres, and we'll put a link in our chat in a second. All right, and if the next one, and this is also where you'll find our phone number and our website to make an online inquiry. Our website also includes some helpful resources and access to fact sheets and a number of our previously recorded community worker training sessions. If you move through, our next community worker training session explores Centrelink and family and domestic violence. And if you'd like to, you can register now. I'll add that link to the chat, or follow us on social media for regular updates and educational information. So our last slide is our QR code and our link to our survey. We'd really love it if you could take a couple of minutes to complete this, as your feedback really does help us improve and it helps us to secure funding so we can continue to provide these free sessions. We hope you enjoyed the session today and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Thank you very much. Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, Thea. Bye, everyone.
Bye.